the island was in complete disarray. Civil war between Arab and Greek had divided the country. Confusion and anarchy sapped its potentially rich economy. It was the natural next step in the Norman conquest of the south.
Ci sono molti motivi per cui i normanni intraprendono questa difficile conquista della Sicilia. Il primo motivo è che è una terra ricca. 2 secoli di dominio musulmano ne hanno fatto una terra ricca, con nuove colture, dallo zucchero allo zafferano al cotone e soprattutto il grano.
Sicily exceeded all Norman hopes, a field of dreams for young Normans eager to make their own way in life. Slowly they turned their backs on their homeland in France. The Piazza Armerina in the heart of Sicily. Every year, proud Sicilians revel in their Norman heritage. They're here to celebrate the coming of the Normans and the reclamation of the island to the Pope. The Normans succeeded because of their superior military strengths. But there was an X factor too, the total conviction that God was on their side. When Roger laid siege to Palermo, Sicily was conquered. But there was no sack of the city, no rape, no plunder. Roger had demonstrated a chilling aptitude to cruelty in the past, but he had now developed the gifts of statesmanship and diplomacy. In a display of un-Norman-like behavior, he offered the local Arabs the most generous surrender terms.
Roger did a tremendous job because he was the one who realized, I think, that there were very few Normans. The Sicily that they'd found was partly composed of Greeks and partly composed of Arabs. And he realized that the only way to make a go of this was if he got both the Greeks and the Arabs on his side. There was no question of dominating them. There weren't enough Normans to do that. They all had to be pulling together. And he had this extraordinary vision, and in the 12th century, or the 11th century indeed, at the end of the 11th century, it was the most extraordinary vision that you could get these 3 totally different peoples and religions and languages all to cooperate and make a go of this extraordinary little island.
Muslim and Greek Palermo had escaped the full brunt of the vicious and bloody campaigns engulfing other centres around the Mediterranean. Devout Catholics themselves, both Roger and Robert openly tolerated other faiths, practices and their followers. Not something, incidentally, which would have gained the approval of Pope Leo. He wanted everything in his hands. Christ in Sicily, vowed Roger, would be worshipped the way the people chose. So too would Allah be openly worshipped in the way the Arabs chose. Such religious freedom was unheard of elsewhere in the medieval world. As Norman knights were helping to free Jerusalem, so power in the south crossed over the Straits of Messina. It was solely vested now in the remarkably un-Norman-like Norman, Roger II. Although a devout Catholic, he had avoided the First Crusade. Warlike pursuits, even holy wars, held no attraction for him. He preferred to master the arts rather than the sword. He was a southerner, but more, he had leanings towards the Orient and to the Arab world. No longer a backwater of the Norman state, Sicily's unique multicultural elements would make it eventually the jewel in the Norman crown. King at last, Roger found it both agreeable and prudent to live like one. At the royal palace in Palermo, little remains of the original Saracen fabric of the building. On the first floor, Roger personally supervised the construction of the Palatine Chapel. With gilded Corinthian capitals, heavily ornamented pavements, and magnificent mosaics, the chapel glows gold. Nowhere in southern Italy is the achievement of the Norman kingdom given more stunning visual expression. Latin, Byzantine, and Islamic traditions fused into one harmonious masterpiece.
Well, Roger II was, you wouldn't have thought he was a Norman to look at him. He had an Italian mother. He was very dark and swarthy in appearance. He wasn't one of these sort of blonde Vikings at all. But he'd been brought up in Sicily, so he spoke beautiful Latin, French, Greek, and Arabic. He spoke all the languages of his country, all of which were official, accepted languages of the court. And he built up Sicily. Obviously, it was an incredibly well-placed island for trade. It was bang in the middle of the Mediterranean, halfway between north and south, east and west, and the bazaars of Palermo were absolutely bursting full. And it was doing very well, so it became extremely rich. And with that, with the money that he made, he produced this extraordinary court, first of all. He brought wise men, scholars from every corner of Christendom. If you were, let's say, an English scholar, there was one called Abelard of Bath at that time, and you wanted to learn Greek, you could go to Constantinople, or you could go to Palermo. If you wanted to learn Arabic, you could go to Cordova, or you could go to Palermo. If you wanted to learn both of them, you went to Palermo. So it became this tremendous cultural clearinghouse as well as a commercial one.
While the rest of the continent was locked in battle with the infidel, Roger embraced all the religions of his domains. Once, during an earthquake, Roger saw his concubines and pages pray to Allah for salvation. He announced, "Let each of you pray to the God he adores. He who has faith in his God will have peace in his heart." But it went much further than religious tolerance.
C'è un altro aspetto della coesistenza, della convivenza fra musulmani e cristiani, ed è quello della corte regia. La corte regia è un luogo dove non soltanto i politici, i funzionari, ma anche gli intellettuali sono spesso musulmani e sono al massimo livello. Ricordiamo Al-Idrisi, che è un geografo che lavora per Re Ruggero, scrive una descrizione del mondo in cui gran parte è dedicata alla descrizione del regno di Ruggero, ed è un'opera che viene pure accompagnata da un grande mappamondo, da una rappresentazione d'oro, peraltro molto solenne, dell'orbe terraqueo. Ma Idrisi è soltanto uno degli intellettuali, degli uomini di cultura musulmani in età normale.
Of all the palace scholars, Al-Idrisi was the one whom Roger admired the most. His work culminated in one of the most comprehensive of medieval maps. Beautifully illustrated, it is impressively accurate. At the crossroads of 3 continents, Sicily was the perfect place for Al-Idrisi to carry out his work. At Palermo's bustling ports, clerks of the court picked the brains of anyone passing through. They noted down everywhere they had been and everything they had seen. Roger's eclectic administration included men of arts and science, of politics and philosophy. It took more than architects to give brilliance to Roger's court.
So you've got the three great races of the Mediterranean, all coming together, all sparking each other off, all cooperating, producing this incredible thing at a time when everywhere else in the Mediterranean they're all at each other's throats. I mean, the Crusades are going on, there's a great schism between the Eastern and the Western churches, the Western Church and the Orthodox. Everything is going wrong everywhere else, except in this one little island in the middle of it all. It's all coming together and producing this incredible thing. It only lasts a very short time, 64 years. But those 64 years were incredible.
Roger's tolerance and the racial harmony in Sicily set an example of what is possible. Sadly, on the 26th of February 1154, Roger died. It was a peaceful passing, and his body brought for burial here in the cathedral he had built in Palermo. On his sword ring were engraved the words, "The Apulian, Sicilian and African all obey my will." From his father, Roger II had inherited a county. To his son, he bequeathed a kingdom. That son, and his son in turn, were both christened William, and they happily perpetuated Roger's vision. The Cathedral of Monreale, built by William II, bears many of his grandfather's trademarks. Greek and Arabic designs abound. It was indeed a proud offering to the Virgin. The intricately worked Arab wooden roof of the basilica is then followed by golden Byzantine mosaics, all so reminiscent of the royal palace at Palermo. And yet, strangely, as William accepted his rich inheritance, so the great vitality of the Hauteville dynasty seemed to run out of steam. No direct blame can be laid at William's door. The internal fabric of the state just began to decay. It, like William, was breathing its last. William II's greatest sin was his infertility. He did also make one political mistake in consenting to the marriage of his aunt Constance to a certain Henry Hohenstaufen. When William died, childless, so all the ideals of Roger II's kingdom in the sun died with him. Politically, the kingdom survived. It was its ideals that now lay cold. So who now would inherit the crown? Constance's husband Henry had always coveted the Sicilian kingdom. Now he would claim it as his own. He had that same year inherited a still greater crown, that of Holy Roman Emperor. And so, on Christmas Day in 1194 in Palermo Cathedral, Henry was crowned King of Sicily. The people knew that now Sicily had been swallowed up by the vast German Empire. Strangely missing from the coronation that day was the heiress, Constance. But there was a good reason for this. She was in labor. She emerged a few days later with her son, Frederick. He would grow to be a great emperor, but a great German emperor, not Sicilian. In the family crypt at Palermo Cathedral, 4 tombs lie uneasily together. Roger II, the architect of this Norman kingdom. Constance, his daughter, seen unfairly but understandably as the betrayer of her homeland. Her husband Henry, who brought Sicily under German rule. And finally his son, Frederick, the great Roman emperor, whose story belongs elsewhere. The Norman story in Sicily was done. The Normans, as history had known them, had simply disappeared.